This is Mrs. O'Neill for Chapter 11, Section 2. But first, a preview with shapes. Shapes hopefully will get you to understand visually what is going on in a reaction, because you're going to have to describe the 5 general types of reaction. In other words, you're going to have to categorize them. So now you've seen many reactions and you've been able to balance them, but now can you categorize them into 5 general types of reactions? Ha ha ha. Speaking of reactions, again, what I'm going to have you do is draw the diagrams. You're going to have to draw the reactant shapes and you're going to have to draw the product shapes. But not only are you going to have to draw those shapes as reactants and products, you're going to have to write a description of what happens to those shapes in the before to the after, that transition. What's going on with those shapes before to the after conditions. And then I'm going to tell you what type of reaction it is. Because remember, for categorizing these types of reactions, they're given names in chemistry. So pause the video, write in, or I should say draw your shapes. You can either do that one of 2 ways, either drawing the shape like I did or coloring them in as well like I did. So not only did I have the shapes, but I also made them colorful. Now, make sure that you also give me a description. How would you describe to somebody? Now, be a scientist here. How would you describe to maybe somebody who's in elementary school, somebody younger? How would you describe what's going on between these 2 shapes from the before to the after, from the reactants to the products? What's happening to those shapes? So hopefully you paused the video, you drew, maybe you colored in a little bit, and you came up with some kind of description. My description is that the triangle and the circle came together as one. You might even call this a raindrop. So maybe you did triangle and half circle to a raindrop. You might even done it a little bit more descriptive like that. But what kind of reaction is this? Well, what we're doing is we're taking multiple things and we're combining them into one thing. That's called a combination reaction. So make sure to pause and put that in your notes. So again, a combination reaction is taking multiple things as reactants and making one product. And in order to make that one product has to be one compound. That's going to be very important later on. All right, so pause the video, draw your shapes, color in, give a description. How would you describe what's going on with these shapes to somebody younger than you? All right, so hopefully you paused, you drew in your shapes, and again, this looks really familiar. I've taken that raindrop or that triangle and half circle and I separated them into the triangle and half circle. So I've taken one thing and I've separated it into multiple things. In other words, I took one compound and I decomposed it into multiple things. So the type of reaction here is decomposition. So make sure to pause and write that in. All right, so did you notice anything between your combination and decomposition reactions? I kind of alluded to this already. We can take many things to make it one, but we can also take that one thing and decompose it into many other things. So in other words, they are complete opposites of each other. So a combination and a decomposition are going to be opposites. So pause the video, draw those shapes, and then come up with a description. All right, so hopefully you paused, you drew your shapes, maybe colored them in, and had some kind of description as to what's going on here. Well, this is what I see. I see that triangle and half circle again. Maybe you call this again a raindrop, but I see a rectangle. So this rectangle actually switched places with that half circle and made a house and a half circle, or a half moon, if you will. So that half circle switched places with the rectangle. In other words, one shape changed places with one other shape. And what you're going to notice later on is this compound and this element, the elements are going to switch places, but it's only going to be one single element at a time. And so that's why we call this a single replacement reaction. Again, pause and make sure you write that type of reaction down. All right, and the last one, I know there's 5 types, but there's only 4 that I can really show using these shapes. So this last type that we're going to use these shapes as a preview, again, pause the video, draw, color, and then have a description. All right, so what I said was simply that the half circle and rectangle changed partners or switched partners. So there's both shapes that change. So in other words, I took I'm going to call this a raindrop and I'm going to call this a barn. And what happened is on the bottom here, 2 elements switched with 2 elements, though they switched partners. So now I've made a house and I'm going to call this that badminton like thingamabob that you use for badminton outside, that little sport thing, right? This looks like the birdie or whatever that kind of has to go back and forth between the teams over the net. All right, so you might want to describe it that way. But either way, what's happening is that 2 things now are switching with each other. We started with 2 compounds, and it's going to be 1 element from each of those compounds that are going to switch places. So this is called a double replacement reaction. So make sure to get that down. All right, so those are the 4 out of the 5 that you're going to need to know, but hopefully these visuals and these shapes will kind of make sense when we're actually going to be dealing with certain reactions in chemistry. All right, guys, we will see you in class.